everyone. So I think we can get started. Hello, my name is Zoe, and we're here with a panel from Genentech to talk about our experiences and how we got here. Um, so I can start. My name is Zoe Yamaris. I work with the analytical team at Genentech, and I have actually only been at Genentech for 3 years. I graduated about 3 years ago. And so I'll introduce the panelists. Rachel, would you like to start?
Sure, of course. My name is Rachel Basil. I'm a senior scientific researcher in bioanalytical sciences. I've been at Genentech for 5 years, but I've worked in drug development for about 25 years. So 5 different companies and 2 universities. And it's great to be here with you guys today. Thanks.
Kristen? Oh, are you muted?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Harrison Wong. I'm a biometric business partner, and I've been with Genentech for 15 years. I know, quite a long time, but it's great to be here.
Crystal?
Hi, everyone. My name is Crystal Augustine. I am a senior supervisor in a group called Media Prep and Lab Services. So I have been at Genentech for 15 wonderful years as well, Harrison.
And Anu.
Hi, everybody. My name is Anuwalia, and I'm a study start manager at Genentech within clinical operations. And I've been with the company for about 4.5 to 5 years.
Thank you. And so we'll be answering a few questions that we have, but if anyone has any more questions, feel free to shoot them in the chat and we can definitely answer those. But I think it would be best to start off by talking about, how did you get to Genentech? And so Rachel, I'll start with you. Oh, you're muted.
Does that sound better? Okay. So that's a great kind of question. When I first started out as a student, I was in high school when I first realized that I had a diagnosed learning disability, dyslexia. And so that was really difficult at that time. We were just starting to learn about the right ways to help kids with those kinds of differences in their learning. And so I needed to go learn those things in high school and then apply them when I got to college. And I had lots and lots of people telling me along the way, well, I think you're really going to struggle if you stay in the sciences. I think you're going to run into too many roadblocks. And, frankly, I didn't get excellent grades as an undergrad, but what I did was follow my heart and follow my interest in chemistry and in science and stay with it. And now I've actually been able to earn a master's degree in pharmacy with a concentration in pharm chem. And now I get to work in bioanalytical sciences in an amazing place where our drugs help patients every day. So that's the piece that I wanted to bring to you guys today. Thanks.
No, that's amazing, Rachel. And it's great to see, what you did, like even with a learning disability, that didn't stop you. That's awesome. Crystal, how about you? How did you get to Genentech?
In undergrad, I actually studied biology. I always loved science. And one summer I was actually studying for the MCAT because when you study in science, you think you're going to be a doctor, right? That's almost always the path that you think you're going. And I landed a wonderful job as a technician here at Genentech. And I decided I don't think I'm interested any longer in going into the medical field. There was this whole new world opened up to me called Biotech. And there were so many different types of positions here as well. So I stayed at Genentech. I eventually got into management and moved around to different jobs. And this is really my only company that I've worked for since college. So I really love working here at Genentech.
That's amazing. That makes me feel good too, because I definitely started at Genentech. It's only been 3 years, and I'm like, yeah, I think I could stay here. Like, it's a good company. Harrison, how did you get to Genentech?
How did I get to Genentech is that right after, well, again, let me kind of go back a little bit. In college, I was really interested in numbers, right? Engineering. That's what I started with. However, of course, throughout my time in college, I started migrating and move into the business side of the world. So meaning that is in the marketing business school. And after school, college, I worked a couple years, but then went to graduate school and got my master's in business administration, focusing on finance. But the interesting is that as soon as after I got my master's, I got into consulting and worked in technology. I don't have much of a technology background, but I learned on job and became really a technical person. So how do I get into Genentech now? It is that Genentech was my last consulting client. I came to Genentech and installed data warehouses for finance, because that's my background in finance. But when I joined Genentech, I joined in the finance organization. So I worked in finance for about 11 years. About 4 years ago, I switched to R&D. I must say, so as you can see, I wasn't planned to be a scientist or work in the pharmaceutical or biotech industry, but I came about through a different route. And I must say this is one of the best experience to work and participate in part of biotechnology or pharmaceutical industry, because we're here to save our patients. That has a lot more meaning than anything else that I've ever done.
No, that's amazing, Harrison. Yeah, I know being in a big company like Genentech, it's really cool, not only because there's so many opportunities, whether you're coming in as a researcher, a scientist, or coming in with a business background. And I think, you know, a lot of people I hear, they have one path that they're thinking, like Crystal, like I'm going to go to med school. And then you realize, wait, no, there are other options. And it's always great when you can explore that through different jobs. Anu, how did you get to Genentech?
Sure. So I originally am from the East Coast. So I went out to school in New York, and that's kind of been my place of upbringing, my hometown type of place. So after completing my undergraduate degree, I was very interested in science and particularly oncology. And so I started applying around, and I landed a job at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City. And that's kind of where my whole career started. And I was working within the pathology department there as a research coordinator. And so I fell in love with the whole world of research and oncology and clinical trials, clinical research. And then shortly after that, I was there for about 4 to 5 years. I got married. And then that's what brought me over to the West Coast. And then I wanted to continue my journey. And I thought about Genentech and wanted to get my foot into this company because I had seen how clinical research and clinical trials work on the academic, on the hospital side of things, but I wanted to see how it works on the biotech side of things, you know, something that I had never been exposed to. And so I applied, and I landed a position within clinical operations. And so I worked on a team where we started up trials within different academic institutions and sites, where we surveyed kind of where the patient populations are for our type of trials. And then I moved on to different positions within our department, but then I came back to this team, and now I'm leading a team of a couple of specialists that work in that same area of opening up the trials. So that's kind of how I got into the company, but more specifically into this whole realm of clinical research.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. And you know, a lot of the panelists are making me think, and a lot of the questions we have typically are, you know, what kind of educational background do I need to get into the position I'm in? And, you know, our panelists have a wide variety of different roles in the company. So this is a good question to kind of see, you know, what educational background their peers would have. So Rachel, I'll ask you first, you know, what educational background and kind of path do your peers typically have?
So a lot of my peers who are senior scientific researchers have an undergraduate background in a science like biology or chemistry. Several of us have different backgrounds. So for example, my undergrad degree was in anthropology, but I will say that left me with kind of lots of explaining to do whenever I was applying for laboratory jobs. So I was often feeling like it would have been great to have one of those harder science backgrounds, but it still worked to have the anthropology background and an interest in gain experience.
No, that's awesome. That's a cool background. How about you, Crystal? What are the typical, you know, educational backgrounds for people in your roles?
So definitely life sciences are fairly typical as a background for the technicians. I would say though, we often bring in summer interns when you're in college, and those backgrounds range because we have so many different projects. And when you have a team with very similar backgrounds, you're sometimes missing certain skill sets like data analysis or some of our engineering backgrounds. And so we've brought folks in as interns, and then they're available to us and we know what they're capable of and what our gaps are. So life sciences is definitely common. And then of course, in management, there's a lot of MBAs.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And yeah, I hear that a lot especially at Genentech, where diversity is very helpful, because if you're working with a diverse group, you come in with very different perspectives, which is always appreciated. Harrison, since you had a very roundabout way of getting to your position, what are the typical backgrounds in your role?
So I'm currently in a group that's in PD, product development, which is late stage molecule development. And within that group, within that organization, I'm in biometric. What it is that we look at the study data. So with this group, what we have quite a bit is people with computer science background, as well as biostatistics. But of course, there's another group that also has a psychology background. So as you can see, even within our little group, we have a very diverse education background. And I mentioned that previously I was in finance. In finance, of course, there's a lot of folks that did graduate from MBA and with the finance background, or even accounting.
Cool, very cool. And Anu, what about you?
So in my department, I've seen a mix of people, like everyone has said. A lot of people come in with bachelors, with a couple years of experience. Some people specialize, within a certain specialty. They get a master's or a PhD. Very, very less PhD folks, but a lot of bachelors or masters. And I think it just depends on, like Crystal was saying, yeah, a lot of people have become interns and moved into this department and started networking within the company and landed their fit within my department or elsewhere within Genentech. So it could really vary, but I would just say get as much experience as you can, as long as your education, as well as your education.
Yeah, no, thank you. And actually, one of the questions we had in the Q&A was, do you need a graduate degree, and what percentage of workers just have a BA or BS, CJ? And I would say it definitely depends on the department. So I know in some organizations you might need higher education, but I know with a lot, being an intern and just having a BS is enough to get your foot in the door and really learn about a department. And you can continue in the department. Like I work in PTD, and I would say it might be 70-30%. So 70 have BS and actually don't have higher education. And that's enough. And so it is definitely department dependent. But as you heard from the panelists, there's a wide variety of people with higher education, but that's not necessary as long as you have the experience and you're looking to diversify. So in college, definitely take the time to get internships or work in labs if you can, or if you're not interested in, say, science itself, but getting positions in other roles is always very helpful.
So I wonder if I could,
yeah.
I wonder if I could add to that. I can tell you that in my department, which is part of development sciences, it's sort of that there are two tracks. So I'm a scientific researcher, and that means that's more commonly available to those of us that have either just an undergrad degree or perhaps a master's. And there's actually a separate track that's called the scientist track. And that's usually for people with PhDs. It's not always so strict, but just so you have that in mind.
Yeah, definitely. And I actually, so I was in a rotational program. And so right out of undergrad, I spent 2 years rotating through different departments. And that was a good way for me to learn about the departments, but and the roles and the work at Genentech without having to have, say, a PhD. And so I would even say, like, look for rotational programs if you can, or internships. Someone else asked, Ren said, Rachel's career path in overcoming personal adversity is particularly inspiring. With COVID disrupting the lives of people everywhere, a lot of folks are experiencing interruptions in their personal and professional lives. What advice does the panel have about how to keep all their ducks lined up in a row, recover from setbacks, and or generally succeeding in life? Are there any panelists that want to answer that?
I'll take a stab at that. I think we're all struggling right now. Everything feels very chaotic and overwhelming at times. And I think the thing that's helped the most for me is just to give myself a little bit of grace and let it be okay to not have all of my ducks in a row. Now, I know there are folks who like to be very organized and very, achievement driven and want things to feel just in control. And I think right now that's very difficult. But, if you could just keep focused on a few goals at a time and continue to give yourself that grace, I think that's helped for me anyway.
Yeah, thank you, Crystal. Does any of the other panelists want to answer?
I can answer. I can add to that. So I 100% agree with what Crystal said, and it's also like I feel like set my expectations right. I mean, like you said, things have kind of, it can get really overwhelming, and just don't over bombard yourself with some personal goals or professional goals you want to keep in mind, because understand that everyone is going through, whether in their personal lives, at work, at home, with friends, whoever. And so if you just kind of keep things at eye level, it helps to keep your mind more balanced and not as overwhelming and shaky. I think I felt like that in the beginning of the year when COVID first hit around March, April, that I didn't have a sense of anything going on. And I think it was just a shift in the mindset and just balancing my priorities. And you just feel mentally much better about that.
Yeah, definitely. Someone else actually asked, what do you appreciate most about your company? And I was wondering if anyone wanted to jump in.
I can definitely jump in on that one. As you I kind of alluded, what I appreciate about my company, of course, is the mission. Make me feel that I am actually adding or helping people that's out there in society. And that's what I really like about Genentech. My previous employer was a technology company. Again, I have nothing bad to say about technology. It is to help people's lives too, but we're not in technology companies. It's not saving. So the mission of the two companies are very, very different. And that's what I really love about where I really feel that I am contributing to the society that we're in.
No, definitely. And our mission is doing now what patients need next. And so for a lot of the projects we work on, a lot of the work, that's really what guides people at Genentech. And so I agree, Harrison. I think starting off at Genentech and seeing that mission and people living that mission is amazing. Would anyone else like to add what they appreciate about Genentech?
I would love to add, if I may, that I really feel supported here as an individual. And I feel like my managers and coworkers have always made it a priority to get their work done because we all believe in that shared mission. But we also can be understanding if someone's ill, we'll pick up the slack to make sure that that role is still covered. If someone needs to take a break, then we'll support them through that. And I've been supported in all those ways as well. And I've really, really appreciated it.
No, I agree, especially with everything going on with COVID. I hope I can speak for the entire panel where I feel very supported during this. And I think that's something where even if we are all personally trying to deal with COVID, we also feel very supported as a company too. And I think that's amazing. Someone else asked, in high school, what subjects were your favorite and why?
I'll jump in again. Math.
Yeah,
I mentioned it earlier. That's what I would love to do. But I mean, math was my favorite subject. And I'll be honest with you, I was really focusing on, should I become a math teacher? That was my goal in many ways. But of course, my goal changed throughout the time. But even right now, still, I continue to think about, should I really switch my career to teach math someday? So that's my love for life.
Well, that's the exciting thing, right? Your career changes as you want it to. And I think that's something where all of us see, like, yes, we're doing something now and we're working towards that, but you may decide to have a career change and that's okay. You can decide later on that, oh, like I'm actually interested in this, but having those experiences teach you that. So no, that's amazing. I loved math too. I don't think I wanted to be a teacher, but I did love math a lot. What about any of the other panelists? What was your favorite subject in high school?
I'll share. I really loved English. I liked the creative side to writing. And I thought that maybe someday I would also be a journalist on the side. But what inspired me about science was there was trial and error, and then there was a right answer. So similar to math, where I like the right answer. So I think that's why ultimately I ended up, going towards the sciences.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I think it's funny because I think when I joined science, I was actually surprised where sometimes there isn't the right answer, or they're still trying to figure it out. And I think that was really scary, but also like really exciting. Whereas in school, there's always one answer. Whereas, you go to work and they're like, oh yeah, like you have to solve this problem. You're like, okay, I'm gonna solve it.
Exactly.
No, that's amazing. Let's see, are there any of these other questions? Oh, somebody asked, what is the most challenging part of your job?
I would say for me, the most challenging part is solving complicated problems, but challenging in a kind of healthy way, right? You're going to work together with your teammates. You have to trust one another, that everyone's going to perform the piece that they're responsible for. And you're just going to do your very best with your piece. And you're going to work really hard to communicate with your team members to make sure that you guys are working together towards a solution.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's something I learned a lot in my rotational program. Like the ability to collaborate well is very important. And so I used to always laugh like, oh, like group projects, like they're so difficult. But once I go into work, that won't be an issue. And no, everyday work is like a group project, but it's usually like a good group project. You get good people to work on it. That it is hard to, like, collaboration takes effort. I agree. Anyone else? What's the most challenging part of your job?
I can go. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Harrison. You were going to say something.
No, I was gonna just say, in many ways, that's exactly what it is. What both Rachel and Zoe mentioned. It is about working together. Working together is fun, but also at the same time coordinate. It's like a big orchestra where we have to really all do the same thing in many ways to coordinate, and that becomes the hardest. Sometimes trying to get every duck kind of lined up in many ways. That is definitely tough, but at the same time, it's very rewarding as well. But I'll say that's the most challenging for me.
What about you, Anu?
Thank you, Anu.
Yeah. Oh, no worries. I was just going to say, like, I think because of the collaboration, like how everyone has said, yes, it does make it difficult because you can't, there are times where you just have put your head down and focus on your work, like Rachel was saying. But then many people are depending on you, right, to give an answer back or follow up on something. So I think for me, the most challenging thing sometimes is just keeping up with the emails, right? And that whole communication piece, and like knowing that if I have something due on Friday, like I need to let my coworkers know by Wednesday or Thursday what my piece is. And so just that communication piece, it seems easy on paper, but it can get really difficult, I feel, at least for myself, the larger your teams are. So
I agree. I definitely agree. Waking up and you see all the emails, you're like, oh no, I have to get all my stuff done, but answer these. And this actually ties in very nicely with a question that someone had, what kind of work do you each do each day? Are you in labs, analyzing data, working in clean rooms, coordinating things in meetings? And I'll ask the panelists, but I will say personally, I was surprised by how much time is really spent just answering emails and coordinating with people and communicating with them. I am actually in lab, so I think I'm in lab maybe like 3 days out of the week, and I spend maybe about a day analyzing data and a day in meetings, but it's all spread out throughout the week. So you'll have like a few hours in lab, a few hours answering emails. But I was curious if anyone else wanted to answer kind of, what does a normal day look like for you?
Sure. So for the first 20-ish years of my career, I was in the lab more like 8 or 10 hours a day. I love the lab. I love the kind of experience of it in multiple ways. In this role, this is my first role outside the lab. And so I'm really looking at others' lab work and coordinating things, transferring them between labs. So my day is mostly structured with typically, I would say 5 one-hour meetings with some breaks in between to do things like document review. So there might be specialized documents that help us run experiments that we have to look at and agree upon.
Yeah, that's awesome. Crystal, I think I saw you wanted to answer.
Yeah, sure. So I oversee a team. So it's an operations team. It's a lab that supports the scientist. And so I don't work in the lab. I oversee the operation. I spend a lot of my time in meetings, collaborating with other folks, trying to solve problems, meet customer demands. And when I say customer, that's our internal customers, our science labs. As a people manager, that also means that I am helping develop professionally the technicians with their career path and growth. And then, of course, overall, the safety and the quality of the lab is my responsibility. But it takes a lot of delegation. I have to trust people to do a lot of the work on the floor, and delegation is a skill in its own. So,
Yeah, thank you. Somebody asked a question, which I think a lot of us have kind of alluded to, and so we probably have some good advice, but somebody asked, could you give me any tips or suggestions to get an internship in Genentech? So would anyone like to answer that?
I mean, application is the first step, right? So I think you're going to want to find out about programs where there are internships available to high school students. Most of the ones that I've seen in research are for college students, so keep that in mind, or graduate students. But there are some opportunities for high school students, and you're just going to definitely want to throw your hat in the ring and give it your best presentation. One of the great things that I can tell you about Genentech, I did actually apply to roles at Genentech over 2 years before I ended up getting one that was a good fit. But what was awesome is that people gave me feedback and they helped me grow my application so that I could be much more likely to get that role later. And I think they would do that for you too.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The trial and error is something that is very important. When I applied in college for my first position, I didn't get it, but then the hiring manager offered me an internship and said, hey, do a 6-month internship and then apply to this rotational program again. And so I think that's something amazing about Genentech. They really care about your development. I would say, I think if you go on Genentech's website, you can start looking at, and you filter jobs for interns, you could start looking up, what roles are available and keep that in mind when you are ready to apply in college. But I definitely think, working on your resume, getting feedback is very important, because I'm sure all of the panelists, like we've definitely had to get feedback review on our resumes and then our applications, even in the interviewing process. Anu, there's a question specifically for you, and they were curious, what does a startup manager do?
Sure. So to give you a synopsis about my team, so like I had mentioned in the past, so in clinical operations, we work on a lot of the phase 3 studies and in product development, like Harrison was saying. So there's been a lot of clinical trials being done already for these type of studies. So what my team particularly does in the department is when we have a new trial coming up within cancer, right, or maybe neurology or ophthalmology, like studying the disease of the eye, my team, it comes to our team, and my team really does a survey, right? We kind of research the United States and in Canada. We kind of see what sites are out there that have the patient population that would be willing to come onto these trials, and it's a whole process, right? And we have to set up, a contract with that site, set up a budget for the trial. It has to go through some ethics review, some board committee approvals. There's a whole informed consent process that patient has to sign off on, saying that they agree to the terms of the study. There's a lot of costs that have to go through with that site. For example, if there's a patient, at Stanford University, we would have an agreement with Stanford, and that patient would be coming through that particular site. And so basically, as a study start manager, I just oversee that for my team, and I have a team of about 12 to 13 people, and that's kind of what my responsibility is just to ensure that the timelines we have set in place are moving forward, right? And each study has its own goal, and these are all global studies. So we're just representing the United States, but it's really interesting to see, from start to finish, how a trial comes together. We're in the early stages where we're just trying to figure out, the patient populations, how many patients are we looking at? Is this even a viable trial? Is this even going to be possible for us? And at the end, when recruitment starts and the patient has started their treatment on our drug that we're offering. So that's kind of what my role is. But it's like we said, it's very busy with emails most of the time and just keeping up with all the different studies in different therapeutic areas.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. I know it's even when I heard about what Anu did, I was like, I don't really know what that is. And that's kind of cool being in a big company where there's so many different roles. At Genentech, you have research all the way to commercialization. And so there are so many different roles within Genentech that are very diverse that, you know, you'll meet someone in the cafeteria and you will have no idea what their position is, but most people are very much willing to, you know, talk about what they do. And I would say actually that's a big tip. Just, you know, reach out to people for informational interviews or informational coffee chats. You know, if you want to learn more about their position and learn more about what opportunities are out there, sit down with someone and talk to them about it. That's something I learned at Genentech, and most people are very willing to say, oh yeah, let me tell you about what I do. And it kind of bleeds it blends really nicely to the next question, which is just, you know, what's your favorite thing about your position? And, you know, what is your favorite thing about your job? So any of the panelists.
I'll jump in right now. So what do I like about my job is something that Rachel have mentioned earlier, is their ability to solve any kind of questions. So that's what we're here to do, really. Not, at least for my position, I look at my situation and say, what is the problem on hand? And how do I go about solving this? And that's what it is. And the question that I face is very diverse. And plus, I tend to like to start to move from one place to another, one thing to another. Currently, I do, for biometrics, I do resource planning, meaning that I look at the forecast of what are the demand, what kind of work do we need to do, how many people's work do we need? And from there, I look at the people that we have and how do we better position to meet these demands that is out there. But now, as myself, I kind of want to do something different. So recently, I picked up another project where I am trying to help with e-signature, digitize our work at Genentech and Roche, where how do we make digital signing more prevalent than having paper or wet signature going around. Just any little thing that can help us do things a little faster, a little better. And those are the things that I enjoy the most.
No, that's awesome. I'm glad you're working on that. That would be helpful for all of us. Anyone else? What's your favorite thing about, you know, your role at Genentech?
I love something that Harrison alluded to. I love being able to learn new things. So even as a person with what are sort of learning differences, I never shied away from learning. I'm very interested in it, right? And there's a lot of opportunities to find ways to learn about whatever's coming next. So Harrison talked about a certain technology. I've become interested in artificial intelligence and its applications at work. And so there have been a few opportunities where I could kind of listen in on these amazing people and how they're learning to apply that technology in lots of different ways at work.
No, that's awesome. And actually somebody asked a question that I think relates to this. With biotech becoming more and more powerful with the vast abilities of computers coming into play, is knowledge in CS an important prerequisite to working at a major biotech company like Genentech?
I will say yes, meaning that you don't have to have a degree or in-depth knowledge of everything, but definitely be aware. And I think with the new generation, living with technology is just a given. So just I am, like I said, I kind of ventured into technology, but that's not my strength. However, I have always kind of, how would I say, really encourage everyone to leverage technology to their best ability. And of course, technology is part of our life. It's not only at work, but at home, everywhere. So yes, that will definitely help.
No, definitely. And even, I think Harrison raised a good point. You don't have to be a computer science major, but just speaking the language or understanding the capabilities is important. And I think a lot of the times, you know, one of the things that I saw at Genentech was Genentech brings in a lot of experts in their field. And so you might not be an expert in computer science, but you might have a lot of knowledge and expertise in something else. And if you can collaborate with someone who has that computer science knowledge, that's just as powerful. And so I would say, don't feel discouraged if maybe computer science isn't your cup of tea, but as long as you are open to understanding it and collaborating with people, I think that's something that I've realized in my position. Definitely not a necessity.
I have a thought that I wanted to share.
Yeah.
Sort of related to, you know, maybe not having it in your background, you know, playing with it if you can, being open to it. But Genentech's been really amazing at developing folks. Yeah. And so once you work here, there's so many opportunities. You're very supported in developing your career path. And that could mean, you know, from taking like a 2-hour online training to some, you know, going back to school. Genentech actually helped put me through my master's program after working here. And, you know, managers generally support rotations into other departments. And we have folks in our group who have actually gone to do rotations in groups like HR or other corporate groups that is not their background, they have no experience in. But because we have that culture of continuous like learning and development, it's been really nice that people can continue to develop once they're here, despite what their role is.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And someone actually in the chat was asking something that made me think of this. Like, you know, they asked, is it easy to move around in different departments? You know, they're kind of not sure where they would fit. And I would say Genentech is really good about allowing you to do different rotations, even if you are full-time. And so if you are interested in another department, you can work, say, 10, 15, 20%, learn about another department and make a transition because you have expertise in Genentech and in the work structure and, you know, how pharmaceutical development works. And so to answer that question from CJ, I would say it's not hard to move around. And I think if you have a good manager, which Genentech typically does, they'll support you in trying to help you find your best fit. But I would definitely say, you know, if you're not sure what you want to do, I look at internships, look at other programs where you could kind of learn about where your expertise might help align with your career path. But no, I think it's amazing that Genentech really works towards developing you as a person and an individual. And I think that's amazing.
I just wanted to build on that idea about interdepartmental rotations. There's actually a new tool that they've even developed internal to Genentech, which is almost like an internal version of LinkedIn. So I can go onto there and literally search for certain skills I want to develop and try to connect with managers whom I've never met before in order to work on those skills. And I think that's a really nice tool.
I didn't even know that. That's amazing.
I'll show you later.
Yeah, I need to check that out. See, that's the great thing about Genentech is, you know, you learn from others and then people are always willing to reach out and help you. And so I think that's something that's really amazing. Let's see, with all these questions we have, someone else asked, how do you handle hardships or mistakes? Does it get frustrating at times?
Well, I guess I did make a lot of mistakes, so I can answer that. With mistakes, do I get frustrated? Part of me, of course, I am frustrated because I made a mistake, but it's not something that I dwell on and then kind of just get hung up on it either. So one thing that I definitely do, of course, this is kind of cliche to say it, but you just learn from your mistake and move on. You admit your mistake, you recognize what you did wrong, and you just move on. And that's what we do. We just continue to find a way to strengthen ourselves and build more skills to handle our next situation. And our problem that we solve tend to be very different from time to time. So it is really hard to say, oh, I've done this and I can do it next time perfectly. No, because the situation will be different. So you will encounter a new way of doing things. And making mistake is totally fine. We have a saying in our department, we rather ask you for forgiveness, just do things what you want than permission. Just do it. Making mistake is okay. And that's the culture that we have.
I agree with Harrison. We like to promote a little bit of risk taking. And so there's mistakes are going to happen. That's inherent. And we're pretty good about, you know, not having a blame culture. And when mistakes happen, we look at, okay, what are the administrative controls or engineering controls that are to blame here, right? And not the person. And also just that's part of research, I think, is trial and error, mistakes. Yeah. So I think we're pretty good about, I do feel frustrated at times, but in general, like the support, and again, it's okay to make mistakes.
I would just build on what Crystal said. In research, 9 out of 10 things that we try do not work. And that's not a mistake, that's data.
We have a question that's asking, what role is Genentech playing, or are there any particular departments within Genentech that are putting efforts towards vaccine trials or towards finding treatments for COVID-19, maybe even partnering with other companies? I don't know if anyone wants to answer that.
I mean, I know a little bit about some of the trials that have been going on using a drug called Actemra, which is already a marketed drug. And it's an inhibitor of IL-6. And there have been several trials. And I also know that there are some publicly announced partnerships, but I don't know too much about those specific partnerships. Maybe someone else on the panel has a better sense.
So so this is where internally, as a company that does biotechnology research, as Rachel mentioned, we do work on Actemra to help with respiratory problem. But then we as a company decided that we won't do too much in, I guess, vaccine related research in the very beginning. So we're doing partnering. So you can see that another branch of the business is really reaching out to other company out there to solve the question of how can we not necessarily come up with a drug, but how can we assist another company partner so we can deliver a medicine or vaccine out to the public as soon as we can. So what are we really good at is not only manufacturing, but also our distribution. So how can we partner and leverage that from that angle? But at the same time, Roche as a company, we have a diagnostics. So we are definitely we focus on some diagnostic tool out there to help measure our antibody. I don't know what other better term to really use, but test out the antibody that's in your system.
Yeah, definitely. I think Genentech's big goal is not to say reinvent the wheel, but instead doing what we can and what is within our expertise to support the COVID-19 pandemic. And so whether that be diagnostics, whether that be looking at treatments for the health issues that COVID is causing, even if it's not a vaccine itself. I think those are ways that we're really looking at really combating COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And I would add to that the first way that I got into the idea of thinking about AI and its application to research was through a volunteer program. A bunch of us would meet at 6 in the morning a couple of times a week and broke into groups and tried to build AI that would crawl the research and pull out ideas for what things we could test. And so there's a lot of excitement and interest in helping people here, and people are excited to do it even outside of their current roles.
I think I see someone has their hand raised, so I'll see if this actually works, but Lawanda, I think. Maybe not. Okay. I think she just accidentally put her hand raised. I'm gonna stop that. Let's see if there are any other questions. Oh, one of the questions, what is a surprising fact about your work? It's a hard one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I will say for me, I was surprised by how many meetings I would be in. I think it definitely makes sense. So like when I started, I'm in the lab a lot, working on, a lot of instruments, on the analytics. And I didn't realize that a lot of the time that would be spent with, but I honestly really love it, is strategy. And so working with teams and understanding the impact of what you're working on. And so I think a lot of times we're so focused on our projects. Genentech does a good job about asking, okay, how is your project impact the whole? And so because of that, you are in a lot of meetings, but I was definitely surprised that I would have so many meetings, even though I thought I'd be in lab most of the time.
I would say I mentioned that I had worked at other companies and other universities. And for me, I'm pleasantly surprised by the sort of helpful organization of things like meetings. For example, if someone schedules a meeting, they literally put it on my Google Calendar and it says it's going to be an hour and it is an hour. Whereas in my previous life at smaller startup companies, I would walk into a meeting room and it maybe was scheduled for half an hour, but 2.5 hours later, we'd still be sitting at the table. So I appreciate this level of structure. It's easier for me to manage and understand.
I'm actually surprised about this year, what I'm able to get done working from home and not being in the office. I think at first it was a shock for everybody and how we're going to get through this. And I remember in March, I was thinking, oh, am I going to work the whole week from home, right? That sounded kind of weird for me. And then now it's end of October. So you would be surprised the potential your team has, the potential you have to come together and virtually connect. And I think this is a way of the future, and it's here to stay in some capacity. But you can get a lot done if you actually, when actually you have to, you know, being at home, and it's actually quite comfortable sometimes.
One thing that surprised me was just how connected I feel to the patient, even though I'm not necessarily in manufacturing, touching the drug, or in a research lab, creating the molecule or finding the molecule. And Genentech does a really good job about this because we have billboards all over campus with our patients' faces and names on them. There's this week every year called Patient Connect, where we actually have patients come on site and share inspiring stories. And so Genentech does a really great job of making sure that everyone feels part of the solution and part of the cure, everywhere from like the scientist to the janitor to the CEO. And, you know, day in and day out, even if your job gets a little monotonous, which sometimes it does, I still surprisingly feel very connected to the patient, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And actually, that leads into the next question is, you know, what do you miss the most about being on campus? You know, with COVID and all, is there something that you really miss back when we could be on campus, pre-shelter in place?
I'm actually on site now. So
I was going to say, it looks like you are on site.
I'll leave that to everybody else.
I mean, for me, it's the people. I love the casual interactions, walking around campus and seeing friends, seeing people, and maybe even chatting about a weird, cool idea like, oh, maybe we could work on this. So that's something I really miss. And I bet, Crystal, you even miss it now because there's so many fewer of us there, right? Because we're really working hard to protect those of you who have to be on campus.
Exactly, and the social distancing, right? And they've closed a lot of the common areas where we would come together and chat. So even though I'm here, you're right, there's a lot I miss.
And I'll echo what they said. It's really about the human interaction, that close proximity that you have with your colleagues. When you do this, you're just building that relationship. And what that does is to help us to collaborate a little better. Right now, when I occasionally set up Zoom calls or just meeting calls with my colleagues just to chat. But of course, in COVID-19, working from home, people tend to feel that, oh, if you have a meeting set up, we want to talk something more seriously, right, as a work. But sometimes I set these up just to have a chat, as if we're on campus. But of course, definitely not the same. Therefore, that's what I miss the most.
Yeah, I definitely, there's a place on campus in Building 7 called the 700s Club. And all of my coworkers and friends and I used to sit there and have coffee, and people would walk by 700s and you would just start chatting. And, you know, by the end of the morning, you probably talked to like 6 or 7 people. And I'll be honest, that's probably when the most collaboration happens is, you know, you bump into someone and you tell them about your work and then they have a great idea. And so I definitely miss that. Even though I'm on campus, I miss, you know, bumping into someone and just catching up with them and then, you know, finding out a new project that we could work on. And so I definitely miss that a lot. And I agree, the informalness, you know, is the best part. I think people talk about Genentech, it's work hard, play hard. And, you know, we all work very hard and we care about the patient and we also care about each other. And so that like sense of community that Genentech has, I miss seeing that in person. Somebody asks, when Genentech joined Roche back in 0809, good job on your history, the company became a part of a larger entity. Do members of the panel get a sense of that working for a company that is more than just South San Francisco campus? I will say yes. I have 7:30 meetings because of the time difference, and it definitely feels like we work with our counterparts. So for people that don't know, we work with people in Switzerland, but we can also work with those in Germany. So a lot of European counterparts or Chugai, and it's a lot of early or late meetings, but you know, it is that collaboration where it's very difficult, and I'm sure all of you can agree it's difficult, but it's, you know, amazing to see that we're a global company.
Definitely. I mean, every country has its own little, I mean, I'll say even every city has its own little culture in many ways, right? So therefore, when we have these meetings, sometimes we definitely say one thing, but we all take it a little differently. But what's great about having this international environment is that you really get to meet or get to know people from different parts of the world. And what helps sometimes is that we do have opportunity to travel to another parts of the world. So for example, I've been to Welland in UK or Basel in Switzerland. But once you're there, all of a sudden you will know that the differences in culture are actually really not that different. But once you get to know each other, we all treat every one of us as an individual. But during the meeting, you definitely do sense the differences as well. But once you get together, you really that all dissolves away. So that's the one thing that we do have, and we have opportunity to really get to see and get to travel to other parts of the world so that we get to know and experience folks out there and learn a little bit more about them.
I agree. It's definitely funny when you try to say like an American joke or an American ism. Like I said, devil's advocate, and they're like, what does that mean? But then they said something else and I was like, what are you saying? But then you learn so many new things that it's fun. Daylight savings time is very difficult, not gonna lie. Makes it a lot harder. And somebody asks, are there opportunities to move abroad long-term to work for the company? I actually do know somebody who rotated in Basel and then she ended up staying there. So she was from the United States, so it can happen. I don't know if you guys have anything to add, but.
I know quite a few. I know quite a few people have done that. I personally also wanted to do it, but I do have a family, so it's a little bit harder. But I know that other folks who did it as well, they do have family. They're just more courageous, but you definitely have that opportunity any parts of the world in many ways, because Roche has a presence in every corner of this world.
And it's definitely, someone asked about business trips. We definitely haven't gone on any recently. It has to be business critical, but it was always fun being able to go on a business trip and learning about a new culture. So someone asked, has anyone gone on one? And I'm sure most of you have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, not recently. Well, yes, but not this year.
Yeah.
I think February was the last time I went. After that, it stopped.
Yeah, but it's definitely great being in a global company because you get to learn, you meet all your counterparts and learn. But now, I don't know about you guys, but we are learning what are ways that we can work remotely. So there are a lot of like trainings that, like I'm in lab, so you typically teach someone how to do a method or an assay, like a test, and an analytical technique. But now we're learning, oh, we can actually do this on FaceTime. It's not as difficult as we thought it would be. So I'm not sure if you guys have had any kind of adjustments that might even be long-term with COVID.
I wasn't going to talk about that. I was going to talk about an opportunity in development sciences at Genentech where you can do these 3-month rotations to sites around the world where Roche has a presence. And it's an amazing opportunity. And I actually was lucky enough to get selected to go to Chugai in Japan, but it was going to be this year. So who knows what's going to happen. But I'm still studying Japanese because, I'm hopeful that one day we'll get that together. But yeah, they're in Welland, they're in New York City, they're other sites that I'm totally forgetting. I want to say Penzberg in Germany is another, and there are even more. So that's a rotation opportunity where you could do something like Zoe's describing. If you're in the lab, you can go and like work side by side. let me show you how I'm doing this. Let's do it next to each other and do this tech transfer in the best way possible. You can also do it for other purposes that are business related. So you just have to make a business case.
Yeah, no, I agree. Wow, I think we have 2 minutes left and somebody's asking the hard question. Is there anything you don't like about your job? I don't know if anyone has anything that they'd like to add.
Well, just like anything else, when you work on something, there are portion of it that you do like, but it also comes with portion that you do not like. That's just how it is. For example, my personality is that I like to work on strategic things where I think about, brainstorm, and work on it. But at the end of the day, once you make that become reality, you have to actually do these things and on a regular basis. And repetitive of doing the same thing is something that I dislike. So I must say there are things that I do not like, but it's just life in many ways. The good comes with the bad along with everything else, but I think that's entire package.
No, I agree. I mean, like, sometimes I don't like the early morning meetings. I'm not gonna lie, but you know, there's some things you just have to do. They're part of your job, or like writing reports might be kind of not my favorite thing, but I think in any job it would be that way. So
I just wanted to add, there's a great thing about Genentech culture within GRED, the organization I belong to, called a listen and speak up culture. So I learned to try to think about those things I don't like as things that I might want to change and might bring up.
yep, that is a great perspective. I like that a lot. I think we're at the last minute. So thank you guys for being the panelists for today. And thank you everyone for attending and all the questions. We really appreciated that. You guys had a lot of very good, specific questions, very informed questions. And so I really appreciated that.